So far, we focused on the length of words in discussing how to avoid needless complexity. I'd like to look at a couple of expressions that on the surface seem short, but add a complexity that we want to avoid. One such expression is E dot G dot. Now, this particular expression is one that you see faculty use quite a bit, and oh, they look so professorial when they use it. And you think, well, what's wrong with that expression? It's shorter. What I would argue is that it takes the most powerful piece of punctuation, the period, what is essentially a stop sign at the end of a sentence. They take that piece of punctuation and they dilute its importance. Moreover, when you just look at the page, just sit back and look at the page, when you have expressions such as e.g. or i.e. dropped in, the page looks more complex. And our writing, because of the equations that we use, the chemical symbols that we use that are inherent in our writing looks complex enough. And so you take e.g., and what I would argue is, hey, look, we could come up with two short words, one syllable words, and we could drop those in, such as, and that would replace this complex expression. Another expression, as I said, is i.e. Now, i.e. means meaning that. And so what you could drop in would be that expression, meaning that. Or you could perhaps drop in other words. These two expressions, e.g. and i.e., another reason I will argue against them is that they are often not punctuated correctly. If you do use them, a comma has to follow them. And then still a last reason is that they are often misused. E.g. comes from the Latin, exemplare grati. It directly translates to for example. I.e. also comes from the Latin, meaning id est, or translated as id est, and then at means that is. And so people, if you're going to use those, make sure you know what they mean. Still, another perspective on words has to do with what we think about when we see the word. Take a word such as factor. What image comes to your mind? Well, to me, absolutely nothing comes to my mind. And that's a concern that I have as a writer, because the best writers want to anchor their words in what we call concrete expressions, expressions that give the audience a sense of sight, sound, or touch, maybe smell or taste. And factor by itself gives none of those. Same is true for program or goal. Now, I'm not saying don't use those words, but if you do use those words, make sure that they are anchored the first time you use them with an example. So in a report, it might be something such as factors such as cost. So we've looked at a number of different small things about word choice. Let's look at a bigger example and see how it plays out. Because some of you are saying, oh, this stuff is really small. But what I'm going to argue is that once you start making certain choices in a sentence, that if you're continually choosing words or expressions that are needlessly complex, the effect on the audience is quite serious. So take a look at this example. The goal of this study is to develop a commercialization strategy for solar energy systems by analyzing factors impeding early commercial projects, i.e. Solar One, and by identifying the potential actions that can facilitate the viability of the projects. Did you get that? I got to tell you, that's a tiresome sentence to read. And I would like for us just to walk through that sentence and just challenge needlessly complex words and expressions. So, first thing here that we might challenge, some of you might say, hey, what about goal? Well, understand that this sentence itself is defining goal. So the person is trying to define goal, that's fine. So we read through that, but then we get to this term commercialization. So that's a long word, commercialization. Wow, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 syllables. That's a lot of syllables. You know, the number of syllables affects how complex that writing appears. And so you probably heard the expression that somebody reads at a 8th grade level or a 12th grade level. Well, as readers, we want to read it at as high a level as we can. But as writers, we would like to write at about 11th grade or 12th grade level. That doesn't mean our ideas are 11th grade or 12th grade. Our ideas are up here as professionals. But the level of complexity of the writing is 11th and 12th. Because if we write way up here with our writing, then our poor audience, they're using all their CPU in their brain just to figure out how the sentence is put together. So what's most efficient is writing about, for a professional office, writing about 11th or 12th grade. And what determines that are these number of syllables. And so, boy, a 6-syllable word, boy, that really pushes it up. And for us in science and engineering, the challenge is not to write up to 11th and 12th. The challenge is to keep it down from 16, 17, or 18, keep it down to 11 or 12. So commercialization, wow, man, that's long. Look, we continue reading through, and we get to factors. Factors now, here, this is a term that we don't have a such as. We don't know what that means. So that one's an abstract term. We continue on, and we get to that friend I had mentioned before, IE. And that friend IE is in a parenthetical with a term that's in all capital letters. And one thing I'd like you to notice about the all capital letters is of SolarOne, it is not an acronym. It's essentially a proper name of a plant. And so generally it's just the capital S and the cap of solar and the capital O of one. But that's not what the writer wrote. The writer put everything in all caps. Why? Well, I don't know exactly, but my guess is the writer saw, hey, I'd like to emphasize SolarOne. And so maybe I'll put it in all caps to make it stand out. Just as with needless periods being used in an expression such as IE, just having needless capital letters also leads to needless complexity. And does it make sense? You're trying to emphasize that term, but what you did is you put it in a parenthetical. A parenthetical means that you've essentially subordinated the idea, but you subordinated it, or this writer did, and then tried to increase its importance by putting it in all caps. That just doesn't make any sense. And then notice, i.e., wrong expression. I think what they wanted was e.g., but what a careful writer would then write would be something like such as. Continuing on, we got identifying the potential actions. Boy, those are some long words in there. And they're also abstract words. There's not an image that comes to our mind. We've got our friend facilitate, and then we've got an ability word, viability. And so all of those I would challenge as a writer. Now, not all of us are gonna make that challenge point the same place. But all of us should be looking at that balance between being precise and being clear. And so challenging these expressions and rewriting, here's what we came up with for this particular sentence, which actually comes from a proposal. This study will consider why current solar energy systems, such as SolarOne, have not reached the commercial stage, and will find out what steps we can take to make these systems commercial. Now, I want you to realize this proposal is about 50 pages long, single-spaced. Imagine yourself reading the top version, okay? Those 50 pages. Would you rather read that, or would you rather read a writer who's making the choices in the bottom version? Man, I can tell you right now, I would rather work with the person, or I'd rather read the work of the person who wrote the bottom version. One last thing before we leave needless complexity at the word level is to move just a little bit into phrases. And I'd like to go back to titles, something we talked about in an earlier lesson, and take a look at the following title. So this is a subject line to an email. Wireless Soldier Health Monitoring System. What does this person mean here? You know, it's kind of hard to decipher. I guess a good question is, what exactly is wireless? Is it the soldier? Is it the health? Is it the monitoring? I think it's the system. And one thing to be real careful about, and perhaps in the age of texting, this particular stylistic flaw comes into play quite a bit in scientific writing, is it's real important to have the small words, the tos, the these, the ofs. And so rewriting this particular title, look at what we've come up with. Wireless system to monitor the health of soldiers. We read that once and we understand it, as opposed to the other one, we might read several times and really not quite understand it. Don't fear the small words. Those are important to us, particularly in phrases, to help that audience understand and separate the details of that phrase.